Previously, on Fear of the Demon Hunters. Vivianne Sobreya is a member of the Predator Coalition of Demon Hunters in Dimension D667, but secretly, she herself is a demon. She keeps this hidden from her coworkers due to the grim things she did when she was first turned into a demon, but now her secret is in jeopardy. On a mission to Fiji to hunt minions of the animal demon general, Zooviathon, Viv thinks she is helping save a high school-aged girl getting chased by the fiends, only to find out this is actually the Queen of Demons, the one who turned Viv into a demon, Fear herself. Fear, disguised as a normal human going by the name Reva Arvos, recognizes Viv and tells her to stay quiet about who Reva really is. She claims that all she wants is to get to the Coalition headquarters, steal a powerful artifact called the Demonitrix, and get out of there. Reva claims to have the ability to track demons, so that Commander Tamika Wiggins will bring her back to the base. If Viv does anything to reveal Fear's plan, she will tell the hunters about Viv's demon identity, and possibly do far worse than that. If you're enjoying this series, please consider liking, subscribing, and maybe sharing the series playlist with someone you think that might enjoy it. Now, let's get into the next chapter of Fear of the Demon Hunters. Every step closer to the Coalition jet, Vivianne felt like she was sinking farther and farther into darkness. Right beside her, walking in cold silence, was the very being that had caused the Predator Coalition of Demon Hunters to be created in the first place. How many people had Fear herself, or Reva, killed either directly or through her demons? And how many like Viv had she turned into demons to keep doing her bidding? Even Viv could smell the stench of fear billowing off herself as they broke through the tree line to reach the jet. "You okay, final girl?" Viv's heart jumped. She'd forgotten that Jax was on her other side, and that he had no idea who this girl with them really was. Viv nodded, trying to remain calm. "Yeah, fine. Was just a draining mission." He seemed surprised by the comment, but said nothing, getting the sense that Viv didn't want to talk. They got into the sleek black jet and sat in the seats lining the walls. Reva sat across from Viv. Jax went to check something in the cockpit, and every step he took away, Vivianne wanted to scream for him to not leave her alone with Fear. Clayton and Tamika were doing one last sweep of the area before regrouping back at the jet. Jax stepped out of the room, and instantly Viv heard a voice echo in her head.
"Can you hear me, Himanapoda?"
Viv sat upright and stared at Fear, whose head was down, but her eyes were peering up at Viv's. Again, Vivianne heard the voice, but Fear's mouth didn't open.
"Good, so I can still demon link to communicate with you."
Her face shifted into a terrified pout.
"Even as I pretend to be poor, timid little Reva."
Viv tried to send a thought back, thinking, "Get out of my head, I'm not telling anyone anything, so just leave me alone till we get back to the base." But before she finished the thought, Fear interrupted.
"If you're trying to link back, I'm not hearing anything. Guess we'll have to go deeper."
There was a cry like people screaming in Viv's ear on either side of her. Her eyes glazed over black, and when they cleared, she was in a dark purple and black room with domed walls and ceiling around her made from slowly shifting tentacles. Viv felt like the scent of her fear was amplified tenfold in this place. Viv backed away as she saw the Demon Queen standing in front of her, no longer in her disguised form. Viv wanted to move quickly, but her entire body felt as though it were moving through thick sludge.
Where are we?"
Viv asked, but her words came out at a far slower speed than her mouth moved. Fear rolled her eyes and walked at a casual pace towards her.
"Even in here you're not fully linked. Guess I should have expected that from someone working so hard to hide her true self."
"Himanapoda is not my true..."
Before Viv could finish, tentacles sprang up from the ground beneath Fear, wrapped around her and pulled her into the floor. Viv's body shook as she looked around for where the Demon Queen would emerge. She tried turning around as quickly as she could, but it was like the faster she tried to move, the slower she went. As she kept turning, she slowly started to make out the form of Fear, sitting cross-legged behind her on a throne of tendrils.
"Why are you bothering to stick around the hunters anyway? Were you hoping to one day hunt me down and kill me for what I did to you?"
Viv knew with her slow speech she wouldn't be able to get out much, so she said,
I want to redeem myself.
Fear's sadistic smirk slipped into a scowl. She stood up from her chair and marched right up to Viv, tentacles raised like steps so that Fear could get right into Viv's eye line.
You think people will ever forgive you? You clearly think way too highly of humans.
Fear clamped one hand onto Viv's shoulder and put the other on the side of her face, making sure she didn't turn away.
No matter what you do, no matter how many demons you kill or people you save, when they find out who you really are, they will never forgive you.
Something odd happened as Fear spoke those words. Viv saw her face flicker from her demon form into the crying face of a little girl, like Fear's form as Reva, but younger and clearly terrified. Viv also noticed that the scent of Fear had gotten much stronger when Fear herself had approached, and it was almost overwhelming now with the Demon Queen so close. Viv asked,
What are you afraid of?
"Wheels up, let's go." Viv's head whipped back and she bashed it into the wall of the jet behind her. She was back in the plane, and Clayton was walking by her, now looking down at her confused. "Why so jumpy, final girl? What's wrong with you?" She looked at Fear, who was shaking and fidgeting, pretending to be Reva again. Viv rubbed her head. Sorry, I didn't sleep great last night." He rolled his eyes. "The night before a mission? Smarten up, or that nickname won't be true much longer." Jax was already sitting next to Viv again, and she wondered what he'd seen. Had she and Fear just been in her head? Their bodies must have still been in the jet, or it would have caused a much bigger scene. Either way, the main thing Viv was wondering now was what she'd seen in Fear in that encounter. And why had she gotten so mad just from Viv saying she wanted to redeem herself? On top of that, what was the Demon Queen herself actually afraid of? Was it Zooviathon? Why were his demons hunting her anyway, and why did her powers seem so limited? Viv wished she could just ask all these questions, but Tamika had briskly moved into the cockpit and got the plane in the air. As horrible as that Demon Link place had felt, Viv almost wanted to go back in so she could learn more about what was going on, but she had no idea how to make the link herself. Plus, with the others around, it may look too strange. When they were off the ground and had made their initial ascent, Clayton turned to Reva. "So, you claim you can track demons. How'd you get that power? How'd Fear herself not find you and end you for having it?" In her head, Viv heard Fear again.
He talks this way to a terrified child? I forgot what an absolute turd Koshmara's ex is.
Viv couldn't believe she was actually agreeing with something Fear said. Reva showed no sign of her irritation and responded in the character she was playing. I don't know. I think I might have just been born with it. I could always feel when there was, like, a weird presence near me, but it was only when I turned... She went on with a vague explanation that Vivian knew was fake, and she hated how it felt exactly like her lying about her throwing knives as her cover for how she actually fought demons. Viv didn't want to have any similarities to Fear herself. Clayton scowled. "It doesn't make sense how you could just get this power out of nowhere. Unless you're from another dimension where people actually get powers naturally, it just doesn't add up."
"Clayton!"
Tamika called through the ship's speaker.
"Are you seriously interrogating that innocent child? Shove a sock in it and leave her alone."
"We can't be too careful, Wiggins. You know demons can be hiding anywhere."
"Hold up.
Tamika interrupted.
We got something coming in hot."
Viv and Fear looked at each other. Fear looked concerned, but Viv couldn't tell if she was just playing her role or if it was real. Vivian's concern was certainly real, though. Clayton clutched his sword. "What is it and how fast does it come?" The jet violently shook and black claws pierced through the ceiling. Wind started rushing through the jet. Jax unclipped from his seat and ran towards the cockpit. "Commander, let me fly! We need your shotgun!" Before he could reach her, a beak punched through the wall right next to Fear, then ripped out the side of the plane, with Fear in her seat along with it. For a brief second, Viv actually felt relieved, but then she heard Jax scream. The wind sucked him right out of the hole and he flew off into the sky behind them. Clayton was just staring in furious shock. Viv knew she could save Jax, but could she do it without revealing her powers? She reached under her seat and yanked out a parachute pack. She held it tight and started unclipping her seatbelt. Clayton yelled, "Are you nuts, final girl? There's nothing you can do for them now." "Well, I've got to try." She unclipped her seat and the wind rushed her right for the open hole. Her shoulders smacked into the tattered metal wall. The parachute pack had taken some of the impact, but as she started falling through the sky, she realized it taking the hit hadn't been a good thing. The bag had been sliced open by the shredded metal. The chute may be useless now. She steadied her body in the air. She looked up and the plane still seemed to be flying on okay despite the gaping hole. The demon was no longer on it. Or, more accurately, demons. Viv's body was soaring right towards Ornithus and Terror, the bird demon under the command of Zooviathon, and the pterosaur demon that once worked for the now slain dinosaur demon general Sorieklis. Maybe since his death, his own demons had started working for Zooviathon. Both demons were clawing and pecking at Fear between them, who was fighting with little more than a small tendril spewing from her stomach. Viv looked past her to see Jax way in the distance, still spiraling through the air towards the Fiji forest below. She looked at the ripped parachute, then tossed it aside. She had considered telling him about her powers once before. Now, she didn't have much choice. Once again, she allowed her clothes to merge in with her body as her skin became black and smooth in some parts, but cracked and rough in others. Her eyes grew into insectoid form and her hornet-like wings emerged. She soared straight down past Fear and the bird demons towards Jax. Her heart raced thinking about how he'd react. But before she got close enough for him to see, she heard Fear in her head again.
Wait, help me!
It was shocking how frightened she actually sounded.
What's left of my powers don't work well without solid surfaces to make my tentacles come through.
Viv knew Fear couldn't hear her response, but she thought, good riddance. If Fear was mauled by the demons, her problems were gone. She kept going, but then Fear added,
I can fly. I can save your friend and wipe his memory so he doesn't remember our other forms if you take out the demons.
That was enough to make her pause. Could Fear really do that? If she could, then Viv could say she had caught Jax and Reva and pulled the parachute. It was an unlikely story, but Viv didn't have time to debate. Jax was falling faster and faster towards the ground. Fine! Viv yelled as she turned and flew back up towards the winged demons. She aimed both palms and fired darts towards them, piercing into Terror's chest and into the eyes scattered across Ornithus's wings. Both beasts shrieked and turned their attention towards Viv. Fear smacked her tentacle off Ornithus's massive beak, and that sent her soaring towards Jax. Fear shot right past Viv, and the demons quickly tried to follow. They were each at least 4 times larger than Viv, and she'd never fought 2 demons at once before. Worse still, Ornithus wouldn't make Jax's rescue easy on Fear. The demon spread its beak wide and let out a caw that echoed through the sky down past Viv like a cannon to the forest below. As soon as it reached, a wave of caws and chirps cried out as hundreds, if not thousands of birds flew up from the forest towards Jax. Fear may be able to protect him, but Viv hardly trusted her to. She had to take care of the demon fast to make its minions retreat. She completely transformed into her hornet demon form, letting a massive stinger emerge from her lower abdomen. She grabbed it and pulled it out, shifting it into a long needle-like sword as she continued to fire at Ornithus with her other hand. The demon tucked its wings and dove at her. She swooped around it, drove the sword right through the back of its neck, and left the blade in as it passed her. She aimed to fire at it from above, but then felt teeth piercing around her arm. Terror clamped its mouth around her, whipped its body around, and sent her spiraling through the sky. She recovered just in time to see it soaring at her again, and lunging for her wings. She flew up out of the way and just barely evaded it. Her wings were far more fragile than that of her foes. Another stinger blade was slowly emerging from her, but it wasn't ready to pull out yet. She flew up behind Terror as it was making a wide turn back towards her, and she wrapped herself around its neck. Clinging to it, she fired more and more of her needles directly into its flesh. It shrieked and thrashed its head back and forth, but she held tight and kept going. Yellow veins were spreading quickly across its body from where she was impaling it. She kept firing and firing, even as it smacked her with its tail, trying to get her off. She just tucked her wings, ignored the pain, and kept blasting. But she didn't notice her other foe swooping back around. The massive hornbill of Ornithus clamped onto her back, crunching her wings against her demon flesh, and ripped her off Terror. Ornithus even kicked the pterosaur demon away from her, not caring about the beast it seemed to be working with. The bird demon clamped its beak even tighter, and Viv could feel her exoskeleton cracking as she screamed in pain. The demon then swung her below it and clamped its talons around each of her arms, pulling them apart so all she could do was thrash and kick. Viv tried flapping her wings. She felt them moving, but not nearly as fast as before. If the demon dropped her, she wasn't even sure she'd be able to keep herself airborne. Worse still, a swell of spiraling birds were soaring towards her. She knew she could likely aim her palms enough to shoot some of them down, but they were just innocent creatures being controlled by the demon. She couldn't bring herself to kill them. They collided into her and she felt them pecking and clawing at her. Most parts of her were tough enough to not be hurt by them, but the ones tearing at her wings were making her likelihood of survival less and less every second. She needed a plan, but she could hardly see through the torrent of beaks and feathers, let alone think. Soon, she saw the upside-down face of the demon turn down to stare at her with a menacing grin as its minions pecked away at her. Thankfully, Viv noticed the long needle of hers still emerging from its neck, and realized that her second one was ready. Kicking a dozen birds as she swung, Viv thrust her lower abdomen up and pierced the long needle straight through Ornothos' skull. The demon's talons finally released enough for her to rip her arms free, and she snatched its neck, along with the other needle stuck through it. She yanked it out and began stabbing it over and over and over and over again, then slashing through the beast's wings, until finally its body started to wither and flutter away to ash in the sky behind them. Viv panted violently as she fell, and the birds scattered, returning to the forest below. It was a relief, but Viv wasn't done yet. She saw that Terror Air, despite its body still swelling with her venom, was attacking Fear, who was approaching the tree line below with Jax wrapped in a tentacle emerging from her back. Viv instinctively dove straight down, but could feel her wings quaking behind her as she moved. She wasn't sure she'd be able to pull up and keep from crashing into the trees, but she was worried if she let Terror Air lay a single swipe on Fear, she may just kill Jax in vengeance. Viv aimed her hand straight down and fired at the demon. Most shots missed, but enough pelted its back to make it turn from Fear and Jax, who she could now see was passed out. Unless Fear had already killed him. Viv was approaching her target and slowly spread her wings. They flopped and shook against the speed of the wind rushing past her, but did slow her descent. She spread them even more and she slowed more, still coming up on the demon fast. She was going to hit it too hard, so she fully extended them, and she shrieked out in pain as she felt one snap. Her body spun out and she felt like she'd slammed concrete as she collided with the demon. She latched onto its back, but it swung its neck around and clamped its jaw around her. She didn't even know what pain she was screaming from. Her entire body hurt as she was hurled straight down towards the tree line below. She braced for another hard impact, unsure if she'd even survive it. But then her leg was yanked, and her fall stopped. She looked up to see a tendril from Fear's stomach clinging to her. She was pulled back up next to Fear, as the pterosaur flew towards the three of them. Floating in place and waiting, Fear reached out to Viv.
The stinger. Give it.
Viv did as instructed, and Fear dropped both tendrils farther below her, seemingly to keep Viv and Jax out of the coming demon's path. Was she actually protecting them both? It had to just be for her own benefit somehow, right? Terror Air got closer and closer and spread its beak wide, as if it could snatch Fear up in one bite. She thrust her hand with the needle forward and another tendril emerged from her, darting the weapon ahead. With a clean stab, the blade pierced right through the demon's throat. That, with Viv's previous shots on it, was enough to finally make it explode into dust and soar past Fear, falling like satanic snow towards Viv and Jax dangling below. Fear spat the ash from her mouth as she hovered the three of them down through the tree line. Viv pushed a few branches aside, but was surprised how gently Fear was moving them all. They reached the ground and Fear set both Viv and Jax down, then landed herself. She retracted her tendrils and any hint of demon faded from her. Viv crawled over to Jax as her body transformed back to her human self. She put a finger to his throat and quickly felt a pulse.
He's fine. Probably just passed out from lack of oxygen because of how high we were when he was sucked out of the plane.
Viv whipped her head up. Wait, so he was unconscious right from when he started to fall? He wouldn't have seen my demon form anyway? Fear shrugged.
I guess, which is good news for you, because I can't wipe people's memories away. You shouldn't believe everything you hear.
What? Vivianne stood up, and for the first time was processing how much bigger she was than Fear. So what, you were just gonna kill him if he saw who you really were? She shrugged again.
Or just force him to keep quiet like you. But now it doesn't matter anyway, because he didn't see anything.
A few flecks of ash floated down past Viv's face. It made her think. Fear may have given the final blow on Terror Air, but Viv was the one who'd done most of the work taking it out, and she'd handled Ornothus on her own. Regardless of why, Fear was clearly depowered significantly, enough so to struggle with 2 demons by herself. Maybe she needed the Demonitrix because she really was scared enough of other demons that she needed the extra edge. Maybe even just 1 demon could take her out.
What are you staring at?
Fear snarled. Viv took a quick breath. This felt reckless and stupid, but it may be her best shot. She instantly shifted her whole body back into her demon form and fired a dozen needles at Fear. 5 hit before a tentacle sprang up from the ground and blocked the rest.
Ow! Stupid human!
Viv flapped her wings as fast as she could, feeling agony with each flap, but still going. She snatched Jax off the ground and dragged him farther away before soaring back towards Fear. She yanked another stinger blade from her abdomen as she fired more shots from her other hand. 5 tendrils sprang up from the ground, 3 protected Fear, and the other 2 swung at Viv. She suddenly understood why Fear was far weaker in the air. Viv spun around the coming tendrils, swooped over Fear to her other side, and snatched her hair, then soared straight up as fast as she could. Fear shrieked angrily and grabbed Viv's arm, trying to tear it off her to no effect. Viv crashed up through the branches to get Fear out of the forest where she'd have the advantage, but before she was far enough from the ground, a tentacle snatched her ankle and whipped them both back through the trees. Viv released Fear and thudded against the forest floor. She scrambled to her feet as 4 tendrils burst up around her. 1 grabbed her already damaged wing and ripped it right off her body. Viv shrieked in pain, but still managed to spot Fear on the ground near her and fire more needles at the Demon Queen. The yellow venom was spreading through her as Fear shifted back to her full demon form. Her arm most pelted with venomous needles was shaking, and Fear's face had slipped from furious to afraid. Viv couldn't help seeing glimmers of the terrified child she'd seen back in their demon link, but she wiped that from her mind. She leapt and with a little extra thrust from her remaining wing, flung past Fear's tendrils and drove her stinger blade through the Demon Queen's shoulder, pinning her into the ground. Fear screamed and actual tears started spilling from her eyes as Viv pressed a knee into her stomach and aimed her free palm at the Demon Queen's face, ready to pierce a dozen needles straight through her skull. But as she held the girl down, she couldn't help but see her as anything more than that, a scared little girl. She figured Fear had to be messing with her head. She was trying to get sympathy so she could get away. Any second a tendril was going to smack Vivianne off her. So why couldn't she bring herself to shoot?
What are you waiting for?
Fear asked in a pitifully quiet voice. Viv's hand was shaking. It was like she was waiting for Fear to strike first, but she didn't. It was like she'd given up. Why are demons hunting you? You're the queen of demons. What is going on?
Who cares? Just kill me. I'm tired anyway.
Viv leaned closer. Just answer the question.
You know what the Archon demons are?
Viv clenched her teeth. You mean the 7 monstrous demons you gave physical form to who are out in the multiverse destroying whole worlds while Koshmara and her friends are struggling to stop them? Yeah, I'm familiar with them. What about them?
I tried stopping one of them and he...
Viv twisted the stinger in Fear's shoulder. Liar! Why would you do that when you made them?
Because they're not doing what I thought they would. They're making armies of their own demons and are just destroying whole worlds for fun. That's not what I wanted. I confronted Psycho Paradolic, and he took most of my powers away, then left me to rot with no way to leave this world and go after him again. The Demon General Zooviathon is convinced that if he kills me now that I'm weakened, he'll become the ruler of all demons in our world. Trust me, you don't want that. He doesn't care about sending his demons after people with the same compassion I did.
What compassion do you think you have? You send monsters to torture and kill scared people.
When I was in charge, my demons gave people a chance to overcome their fears. I send them after pathetic people who are so afraid of living they basically aren't living anyway. If they overcome their fears, then the demons leave them alone, and if they don't, I give them the mercy of killing them.
Viv twisted the stinger more. Don't pretend you have any mercy in you. You're a monster too.
Then just kill me and fix both our problems.
The tears kept coming, and Viv couldn't help but believe they were real. Fear herself had really given up. let's say I believe you, that you actually think you were helping people. What do you plan to do with the Demonitrix?
What do you think? It lets you channel the powers of any demon I've ever made. I'm gonna channel the powers of one of the Archons, then tear the rest of them apart with it. Show them what happens when they betray me.
Viv leaned her head back slightly. You can actually do that?
I created the Demonitrix and made the bodies of the Archons. I'll figure it out.
So you don't know you can do it?
I can at least try. I'm never gonna make up for the things I've done, but I can at least stick it to those stupid Archons before I go.
That statement lingered in the air and swirled through Viv's head. It was the first clear sign she'd gotten. Fear actually had some remorse for the things she'd done. She just didn't know to what extent. What she did know was that nobody had been able to successfully use the Demonitrix since its last wielder died. It was a powerful weapon to use against demons, just collecting dust in the Coalition base. Fine, here's a new deal for you. We keep up this act for now, find a way to secretly take the Demonitrix, and you teach me how to use it. Viv expected an argument, but Fear said nothing, so she went on. I'll use it to kill all the demons hunting you, then together we'll go after the Archons with it. The second she said that, she regretted it. She didn't want to fight an Archon, she didn't even like hunting regular demons. Still, she continued confidently, you get revenge on them, we save the multiverse, and maybe that'll be enough to make up for what I did as Himenopoda. Either that, she pressed her palm closer to Fear's forehead, or I can just kill you right now. The tears finally stopped flowing, and Fear just stared at her for a moment. Viv half expected Fear to just go for death. Her lips finally parted, but before she could say anything, oh my god, Vivianne? They both turned to see Jax on his feet, staring at them both in their full demon forms. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, you might want to pop over to one of my other series I have going right now, like the Trismegistus Academy or Starseed Psyche, which is getting another episode coming up on Monday. Also, I would like to finally, officially, properly announce, for real this time, that Vigilants the book is coming out on December 2nd. That is a Monday, so I'll announce it in that video as well as it's coming out. I know that's still a little ways away, but now that my editor's done with the book, I'm going through all of the edits, making the final changes, changing the subtitle of the book. This has been a long process, but I should have anticipated that it was going to be long because it was my first time going through this. And it means I knew what to do with Trismegistus Academy, Fear of the Demon Hunters, and Starseed Psyche in writing them, so that when I get to the editing stage, it's going to be way easier. But anyway, very excited for that to finally release, and besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I read this week from Marcus Aurelius, who said that mental toughness is knowing life is unfair and playing to win anyway. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.